And welcome to an interview with Cordovan.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me here. I really appreciate it.
We're planning to do a little bit question today. So the first question that we have a lot of think about the community. What is the plan for the class trades trees this year that we get more and more class points? What's your meaning?
Uh, we are going to be doing some classwork this year. I'm not really ready to talk about the extent of what that's going to be. You might be onto something in regards to, say, traits and things like that, among other things that we're going to be doing with classes. But I don't want to hamstring the systems designers at this point by giving away too much. I would say, in general, our goal is to get as many of the classes and as many of the different play styles of the classes in the same general area as we can. In some cases, and it's an ongoing issue with pretty much all online games, where you're going to have some that are a little behind the curve and some that are maybe particular outliers where they're just way ahead of the curve in certain scenarios. And so some of that you tackle with content and design, and some of that you just handle with class balance. And I do think we're going to be taking a look throughout the year here on some of that class balance work. We have to prioritize along with everything else we do, but it is something that we're going to be working on this year.
Yeah, but a different way is people that have a lot of class points didn't know uh, with skill your class, but why we have a lot of class points is that specific oh, you can.
Sorry, could you just explain maybe, if possible, a little bit more about what you're asking regarding class points?
uh, it was the second question about why we have a lot of class points. It's a different meaning what I have. So what is the meaning of your?
Well, we wanted to give people the flexibility to invest and shape their class in a variety of different ways. So that is, I guess, the reason why we have the number of class points we do. Uh, we are looking to potentially increase, say, the amount of trait points available, trait tiers available, things like that, to help um, increase that flexibility and work on that class balance in ways that need to be worked on.
That's amazing. So in the letter of Severine of the end of the year 2017 was a change on the legendary system. What is the information about this year? What you do with change at the class legendary system in this year?
It's hard to say. I don't know. Sorry, just give me a second here.
No problem.
Sorry, I'm using push to talk, and I just put a bunch of F in a document I was writing, so I wanted to get that taken care of. Sorry. So it's hard to say. Sometimes are the things that we mention end up getting shuffled to prioritize other things. In this particular case, it is possible that some of our earlier plans for legendary items may get deprioritized slightly in order to be able to work on that class balance work that we want to get done. But we do have long term plans for legendary items to expand them in a number of different ways, up to and including increasing the levels. I know earlier on in sort of a kind of a earlier question list, you had said, "Hey, these are some of the things we might be talking about." You had suggested maybe is there a plan for legendary items for levels lower than 100? The answer to that is probably not. It would be more
Dit is
likely
wel
that
leuk,
we
is me heel
would
egal.
increase
Eigenlijk omdat
legendary
dat
items to a higher level rather than make them compatible with a lower level.
Okay, that that was a good answer, because the legendary system, it's a little bit probably, you know, people want I think lower than level 100
Dit is wel leuk, is me
Hij
heel
doet
egal.
pirate system, so I know.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where as long as legendary items are popular and people want us to support them, it's likely we will be supporting them. But I don't know about making them lower than level 100. I do appreciate that some people would like to be able to use them perhaps
Dit is wel leuk,
more
is me heel
effectively
egal.
earlier, but I think if we were to invest our resources into the legendary item system, it is more likely that we would want to update them for the current end game rather than make them compatible with a lower level.
Yeah. And so people ask some in the community me, because in the letter comes the class change in class update in this year, and what is an information that you can give us, because why a little bit on class balance and change in this year?
The idea of what kind of class balance work we're going to do this year was something that came up several times during planning meetings this past week among the development team. So, but unfortunately, we haven't formally committed things to the point that I would want to say them publicly here, other than to say we will be doing some class work this year. And we're sort of are of two minds on it. There's one way you can do classwork where you take, say, one class or one aspect of a class at a time, maybe a specific line like red line, blue line, yellow line, whatever, and then hyper focus on that. The problem with that, though, is that if you devote only to one class at a time, you end up kind of playing almost a game of whack a mole, where you never well, I wouldn't say you never achieve balance, but it's more difficult to achieve balance and it takes a long period of time. Another option we've considered might be to take a little bit more of a scattershot approach. So, what you do is you say put together a list of, okay, what are the top 10 things between all the classes that need to be prioritized? So let's put together that list, not just in terms of which is the most significant, but which also is maybe easier to do. You want to, if you can do three things that are meaningful in the same amount of time it would perhaps take you to do one thing that's meaningful, then sometimes you might want to do those three things instead. So the goal, one possibility would be that we'll put together these lists across the board of, okay, so let's do this for the hunter and do this for the runekeeper and do this for the guardian and that sort of thing. That isn't the problem with that from a community acceptance perspective is you tend to see smaller changes over time rather than, say, a specific target of the class you like to play. So you wouldn't say, okay, an update, let's say 23, my Guardian is now set. Instead, what you would see is small targeted changes across the spectrum of classes over time with the end goal that, let's say, a year from now or, a year and a half from now or whatever it ends up being, you're in a much better place than you were where you started. So I think we might be leaning more toward that rather than say the traditional focus of, okay, so update 23 will be the Bjorning update and 24 will be the Guardian update, that kind of thing. Instead, I think we might get more mileage and be more successful with a bit of a more targeted approach across the breadth of classes rather than focusing on one class at a time.
That's a big, amazing information about that will be in this year with class change. So one of my next quest is about the 64-bit client. So it's a long time, a little bit about the announcement, and so what is the concept or plan to do this year with 64-bit?
The main thing about the 64-bit client, and I do get asked this just about actually, not even just about, I get asked this every single week on the live stream. The reality is, though, is it's not going to be ready until it's ready, and there's really not much to say about it until it's ready. We do have an engineer who was hired on contract specifically to work on that 64-bit client. That person has been pulled away from that occasionally to deal with some other necessary things. Some of the, say, security patching that has to be done in the face of kind of like the Spectre Windows thing, and a few other cases where that person's had to be temporarily reassigned. But that person does have as their main focus the 64-bit client. They've been working throughout the year on it, on and off, like I say, and sometimes they do get prioritized to other emergencies. But that is their primary focus. They are making progress. We have not hit any roadblocks in our 64-bit client work. So it's just a matter of when is it going to be ready? I don't actually have a good answer for you yet, but I can tell you that there's nothing stopping us from continuing to work on it. So hopefully in the relatively near future, we'll have news to share about the 64-bit client, and that news will be, here's when it'll be out.
That is great to hear. So, one of the first things that come in Mordor is the elegant system, and is there be a plan to continue it in the next updates, or was it with Mordor?
I wouldn't say that we'll never expand the Allegiance system, but it is not coming in the next update. We currently have no plans to expand the Allegiance system, although we certainly could in the future. But specifically for, say, Update 22 in the near future, we do not have plans to expand the Allegiance system.
Okay, that's not so amazing, but I love this elegant system about the new story that was a little bit in this time. So I have a little bit heard from the community with the housing that people want more and more housing places in your garden or in the house, but what is to plan in the future for the housing?
To start off with, the nice thing about those demands for more housing is it's an indication that we were pretty successful with the premium housing that we put out last year. I think it was last year, right? Was it the year before? I don't even know. Whenever it was out.
It was last year, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Sometimes it's like, what month am I in? Okay. Yeah, so yeah, we recognize that people are really happy with it. We're happy with it too, and we would love to expand it in the future. I can't break any news on this interview regarding that, but it's certainly something that we would be more than happy to do in the future.
Yeah. And the new system that was in Mordor is the Ash of Gorgoroth. Is that a little bit to seen it in update 22, or is that finished or stopped in Mordor at now?
What we're gonna, I think, do with the Ash of Gorgoroth, and this could change, but we've been thinking we like the Ash of Gorgoroth system. The community has certainly invested in it, so we may end up renaming it to something perhaps a little that would be more functional outside of Mordor only. So we would just change the name of the Ash that you already have, and then use that system longer term, in northern Mirkwood and elsewhere. So to answer the question about will the Ash of Gorgoroth be seen in northern Mirkwood, the answer is yes, but it won't probably be called the Ash of Gorgoroth.
Okay, that's great. And yeah, one of the specific quests that I have in the instances, the loot system, is there be better loot in future to see specific on the equipment, because some equipment in some instances are not balanced to the actually update. You,
Are you specifically asking if we will have better loot in future updates or towards a specific system?
exactly.
Well, I mean, we're always looking to have loot that people want to get. Are you asking about featured instances?
It was the question that I have. Plan your better loot, for instance, in future, specific on equipment in the instance loot.
Sure. We have talked about it, and we do want to keep the featured instance loot relevant. We've thought about whether we should say just update the chests that are in the featured instances or update the rewards of the featured instance boxes, or maybe some kind of combination of both. So we haven't committed any kind of time frame to that, but it is something that we do want to do.
Yeah. So for question 11, that was from friends that I play, and a little bit from the community, with a skirmish rewards that you get with skirmish and instances with medallions and siegels. Is there be a change to see it in future, or is there nothing to change at the skirmish medallions and siegels?
I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but at this time we don't have any plans to have more skirmish medallions or sigils.
Ah, that's a little bit probably, I think, with the siegels and medallions in skirmish. Or it's there not a little bit change for more siegels that you can get?
You know, it's one of those things where we're never opposed to it. It's just a matter of all of this development is always a balancing act between meeting the desires of everything everyone wants us to work on and fitting all this stuff in. And I just don't see skirmish medallions or sigils fitting into that plan in the near future.
Yeah. So for in the fall festival, I seen you have create new festival quests with Bingo and Boffin. So in the excuse producer letter stands it come new quests with this year. So is there be exactly new festival quests in the other festivals? So not exactly with Bingo Boffin and so other quests. So new festival quests, is there a plan?
Yeah, I don't know that we're going to have new quests for every single festival when it debuts, but we have targeted at least a couple of new festival quests for the various festivals this year. So we will be seeing some new festival quests this year. I can't say much more about it than that at this point, but one of the things that we want to do is we know that the festivals are popular, not just among you guys, but we like them too. They clearly drive people to play the game, and you know, people enjoy doing it. So we want to continue to support that. And so one of the ways we are going to be doing that is taking a look at maybe some of the festivals that could use a little bit of a refresh or something new in it, and do that work this year.
Great, I love all festival quests that come new. I think it's much of love in this quest that you make. So, but I have a little bit what was on the community side wants a little bit to have question 14. So have you an idea to scale all the content instances and weights?
So the answer to that is we are interested, but we don't currently have plans to do it. Sometimes, depending on the older Raider instance, there are some challenges like deconstructing, that kind of older and complex code and content. And then there's also a matter of finding the right time to do it. Any time that we would spend to scale the older raids or instances would be instead of doing some newer raider instance. So it's something in theory that we're interested in doing. We have talked about it internally, and we would like to do it. It's just a matter of finding the time to do it and finding the right balance between working on that and working on newer things. So at this time, we've got a pretty full plate set for 2018, and we don't currently have plans to do it.
Yeah. So, but it's a good idea to make it. So
I think if we were to do one, and this is, like I said, almost certainly not happening in 2018, but we have thought about, Throne of the Dread Terror in particular as one of the newer raids that could probably be scaled up more easily than some of the other raids to level 115. But again,
yeah.
we don't have plans to do that this year.
Yeah. So for question 15, I don't know. So it's a little bit funnier idea from me. So because other game have to create a classic server, so have we in plan to create it in Lotro, a classic server?
We've kind of informally talked about it. Some other longer term MMOs are doing that kind of thing where they're having, I guess they're called either classic servers or progression servers, however you want to term them. We haven't wanted committed to doing that for Lotro, but it's something we've talked about internally. Like, well, if we ever did do something like that, what would it look like? Where would it be? Where would we find that cutoff time? How would we actually develop that kind of thing? Would there be enough interest to financially support it? That kind of thing. So we've talked about it, but we certainly don't have any actual concrete plans to do it. I think one of the challenges is that when people often think of these classic servers, they like to think of them as, say, turning back the clock. This is the way the MMO played in 2010 or 2005 or whatever it ends up being, right? But the reality is, it's not actually usually truly rolling back the code to a certain time frame. It involves ongoing development to essentially recreate the experience that was had back then, minus some of, let's say, bugs, systems work, IT infrastructure. I mean, there's a whole bunch of various factors that get involved where you can't just literally, hit rewind on your code and say, okay, hit play now. It ends up really being forward development than retro development. Well, what you do is you try to recreate that kind of experience. So it's something we've thought about, and we've actually, because the game industry is fairly insular and likes to talk to each other. We have talked and done some research as to what other companies have done for classic servers and regression servers, but we've just not opted to go that route at this time.
Yeah. So for a little bit changed my uh, So questions. So for one quest that I have at the update 22 was in future to coming on Bulwar. I heard was what you say in the live streaming on the 2nd February, so I heard it.
Yeah, that's the hope. Anything that we tend to pen in an internal calendar can and often will change, but that's currently the plan is to try to get it out not next week, but the week after.
Yeah, so it's really cool, but the 2nd February is one day before my birthday. So,
Nice, happy birthday then.
So I know. So I think that was my interview to Cordovan. So thanks for hanging out with me, Cordovan, in the interview for today, and I hope we make another interview in the next time.
Yeah, it's always great to talk to you, Stefala. I really appreciate it. And thank you for being on Lotro Stream as well. I really appreciate that too.
Thanks, and have a nice weekend.
Yep, you too.
Ne, ist schon wieder einer gegangen.